Welcome back, everybody, to our third part of our deep dive into the Nanking Massacre.
Yes.
In the last two episodes, we looked at firsthand accounts.
Yeah.
We've examined historical records about the Nanking safety zone.
Absolutely.
But now I think we should switch gears a little bit and talk about a really fascinating individual.
Okay.
John Rabe.
Yes.
A German businessman who found himself in the middle of the Japanese invasion of Nanking.
Absolutely. And you know what makes his story even more intriguing is his affiliation with the Nazi Party.
Hold on.
He was a member and...
A Nazi saving lives during the Nanking Massacre.
Yeah, well, he actually used that membership to help establish and run the Nanking safety zone itself.
I mean, that seems so contradictory to everything that we know about Nazi ideology.
It is. It really is. And it raises the question, can someone truly be a good Nazi?
That's a really difficult question.
It is.
So let's take a look at what Rabe did in Nanking.
Okay.
What did he actually do that earned him the title of good Nazi?
Well, the sources paint a really clear picture. He was instrumental in setting up the Nanking safety zone.
Okay.
He was tirelessly negotiating with both the Chinese and Japanese authorities.
Dang.
And it seems that he strategically used his Nazi affiliation to gain authority and protection for those seeking refuge in the zone.
So he was leveraging his Nazi credentials to help the Chinese.
It appears so.
Yeah. So how do we interpret that? I mean, was it purely out of altruism, or was there a more calculated element to his actions?
That's where it gets tricky, right? Because his personal diaries depict him as a man who was deeply affected by the suffering he witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
He describes himself as being compassionate, but not all historians are convinced by this narrative.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes fascinating, right? Because we're looking at subjective interpretations of history, and we have these primary sources like Rabe's diaries, but they only give us one perspective.
Exactly.
So what did people in Nanking at the time think about him?
Well, the sources show a mixture of opinions. Some expressed immense gratitude. Survivors who credit Rabe with saving their lives, Minnie Vautrin.
Right, the American missionary.
Yes. She worked alongside him in the safety zone and wrote about his dedication in her own diary.
And we know that she worked closely with a number of businessmen.
She did, yes.
Including English, German, and American businessmen.
That's right.
So it sounds like he was respected by those who were experiencing the horrors firsthand.
Absolutely.
Right.
But at the same time, there were some who questioned his commitment to the Nazi cause, suggesting that his actions were driven more by self-preservation than genuine concern for the Chinese people.
Even in this horrific situation, people had different interpretations of his motivations.
They did.
It's a really complex legacy.
It is. And, to add another layer of complexity after returning to Germany,
Right.
Rabe continued to praise Hitler and the Nazi regime.
Wow.
Which casts a very, very long shadow over his humanitarian efforts in Nanking.
How do we reconcile these seemingly opposite parts of his life?
It's a puzzle.
It is.
We see evidence of both courage and compassion, but he remained a devoted Nazi.
Yeah, it's a really challenging puzzle that we're going to keep trying to unpack
We will.
in this deep dive into John Rabe and the Nanking Massacre.
Yes. I think it's important to remember that the term good Nazi is often used more to highlight the contradictions in Rabe's life than to actually assess his character.
So are we saying it's more of a conversation starter than a definitive label?
Exactly. It's meant to spark a discussion about individual morality within a larger system of evil.
Right, because can someone who actively participated in the Nazi Party, even at a low level, truly be considered good just because they save lives?
It's a very difficult question to answer.
It really is. I mean, he was a product of his time, shaped by the ideologies and social norms of pre-war Germany.
That's an important point. We can't just judge historical figures solely through our own modern values.
Right, we need to consider the historical context. So how then do we reconcile the fact that he was a Nazi Party member who risked his own life to protect Chinese civilians while still adhering to this ideology that promoted violence and hatred?
It's a paradox that really highlights the duality of human nature. I mean, individuals are capable of both great good and great evil.
Right.
And Rabe's actions in Nanking demonstrate that even within a system as brutal as Nazism, there were still individuals who acted with compassion and courage.
You mentioned earlier that Rabe actually used his Nazi credentials to protect the safety zone.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, he was very aware of the power dynamics at play.
Got it.
He knew that the Japanese military, at the very least, feared the Nazi regime.
Right.
So he strategically displayed the swastika flag.
Wow.
And invoked his Nazi party membership as a way to deter Japanese soldiers from entering the safety zone.
So essentially, he was exploiting the system that he was a part of to protect the vulnerable.
In a way, yes.
That's a remarkable tactic.
Yeah.
But morally ambiguous, for sure. Do the sources reveal anything about how Rabe himself navigated this internal conflict between his ideology and his actions?
It's hard to say. His diaries primarily focus on the day-to-day challenges of running the safety zone.
Things like securing food and supplies.
Exactly, documenting the atrocities that were committed by the Japanese military.
So we don't have much insight into his inner thoughts or struggles.
No, we're left to interpret his actions without fully understanding his motivations.
And it's this lack of clarity that keeps historians engaged with Rabe's story.
It does. It's a puzzle.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about how others perceived him.
Right.
But how did Rabe view himself?
Well, the sources don't give us a definite answer to that question.
Okay.
But we do know that after returning to Germany, he gave lectures about the Nanking Massacre.
Really?
He even sent reports and appeals for intervention to Hitler himself.
He appealed to Hitler to
Yes.
stop the atrocities.
It seems incredibly naive in hindsight, considering the Nazi regime's own actions. But it also speaks to his belief that what he did in Nanking was somehow aligned with what he saw as the true spirit of National Socialism.
So despite witnessing the horrors of the Nanking Massacre, he still clung to a distorted view of Nazism.
It appears so.
It's almost as if he created a separate compartment in his mind for his humanitarian efforts.
It's a fascinating observation.
One where he could separate his actions from his unwavering support for Hitler and the Nazi Party.
It speaks to the complexities of holding conflicting beliefs and how individuals can rationalize their actions.
So we're back to that paradox we talked about.
Yes.
The idea that someone can embody both good and evil.
Right. And it's this duality that makes Rabe such a compelling and controversial figure.
Absolutely. He challenges us to confront the messiness of human nature.
And to resist the urge to oversimplify history.
Speaking of uncomfortable truths, we haven't talked much about what happened to Rabe after he returned to Germany.
Right. Well, initially he lived a relatively normal life, working for Siemens, giving lectures about his experiences.
So did his actions in Nanking protect him from the consequences of being a Nazi?
Unfortunately not.
Okay.
As the war progressed and the Nazi regime's atrocities became more widely known, his past actions came under scrutiny.
I see.
He was actually arrested by the Gestapo.
Wow.
And interrogated about his activities in Nanking.
It seems ironic that the very thing that earned him the label good Nazi led to his persecution.
It does highlight the precariousness of his position.
Right.
He was walking a tightrope trying to balance his beliefs with his actions.
And ultimately, the system he belonged to turned against him.
It did.
That's a tragic turn of events.
It is.
It shows that even those who try to do good within a corrupt system can become victims of its brutality.
Absolutely. And it adds another layer of complexity to his already complicated legacy.
So we have this man who saved lives but remained a loyal Nazi.
A hero and a perpetrator.
It just depends on how you view him.
Exactly.
There's no easy way to sum up John Rabe's life.
He defies simple categorization.
Yeah, he leaves us with more questions than answers.
And that's what makes history so fascinating. It challenges us to embrace ambiguity and confront uncomfortable truths.
It's a reminder that history is not just black and white.
It's a tapestry of human experiences, both good and bad.
I mean, it's almost impossible to really grasp what it must have been like for him,
Yeah.
interrogated by the Gestapo, the very symbol of Nazi terror.
Right.
But at the same time, celebrated as a savior by the Chinese.
It really is remarkable.
It's like two completely separate realities converging on one person.
And it highlights how differently he was perceived,
Yeah.
by the very groups his own ideology sought to harm.
On the one hand, suspicion from his own government,
Right?
and on the other hand, hailed as a hero by those he risked his life to protect.
Exactly.
It really makes you think about the impact his actions had.
It does.
He left Germany before the war ended, so he never faced trial for his Nazi membership.
Right.
But his story in China, especially, continues to have a profound impact.
It's become deeply intertwined with the memory of the Nanking Massacre. He's a symbol of hope amidst unimaginable brutality.
It's a powerful reminder that individual actions really do matter.
They do.
Even within a larger system of evil. Like, how do we remember historical figures with such complicated pasts?
Well, I think Rabe's story compels us to look at the nuances of history.
Okay.
To acknowledge that individuals can hold conflicting beliefs and act in ways that defy easy categorization.
It's not about simply labeling him a good Nazi or a villain.
Right.
It's about understanding the complexity of his life. His actions.
The context in which he operated.
Exactly.
Recognizing that we may never fully grasp the motivations of those who live through such events.
So what can we as listeners take away from John Rabe's story? I mean, why should we care about this today?
I think it serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of ideology and the importance of individual moral responsibility.
Right.
It reminds us that even when confronted with overwhelming evil, we each have a choice.
We can choose to act with compassion and courage.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of critical thinking, of challenging our own assumptions about the past.
To dig deeper, to question the easy answers and embrace the messiness of the human experience.
And perhaps most importantly, it offers a glimmer of hope.
Okay.
It shows that even in the darkest of times, individuals can make a difference.
Acts of kindness and bravery can truly have a lasting impact.
A legacy that transcends the horrors of the Nanking Massacre.
It inspires us to strive for a better world.
Absolutely. John Rabe's story reminds us that history is not just facts and dates, but a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit.
And with that, we wrap up this deep dive into the Nanking Massacre and the life of John Rabe.
Yeah.
We hope you found this exploration insightful and thought-provoking.
We did.
But this is not the end of our journey.
No.
Join us next time as we uncover more about the events themselves
and
the lasting impact they've had on the world.